and former DevOpsDays organizer, Anne-Marie Fred. Give her a warm welcome.
Yeah. I got a mic. Yes. How's it working?
You want to test it?
I can hear myself. Can you guys hear me in the back? Yes, yes.
Yeah. All right.
I think we're all good. All right. So, yeah, hi, everybody. I'm Anne-Marie Fred. Yeah, I was one of the first 5-ish co-organizers for DevOpsDays Raleigh, so it's been a beautiful thing to see how it's grown and how we've been able to help the community out, too. My talk today is about DevSecOps and how to level up IT security expertise in your organization. Obligatory slide. These are my opinions. So, swimming with sharks can be fun and exciting. Security can be fun and exciting too. Who am I? I have 20 years of software development experience. I actually graduated from Duke here. I've been a DevOps practitioner and evangelist since 2011. And early on in my DevOps career, I was focused on implementing CI/CD pipelines, deployment automation. Okay. Yeah. Is that better? Do I need to turn this one on?
Yeah.
Can you hear me now? Ooh. Okay. So I focused on CI/CD pipelines, deployment automation, and infrastructure as code. I was doing a lot of work with Chef at the time. Since 2015, I've been on call supporting parts of IBM.com. And that includes learning about things like high availability and disaster recovery, monitoring the performance of the website and our content delivery networks. And then I spent 3 years as an HR manager. And the teams I managed included test and operations, my IBM, then product pages and discovery, navigation, and search, which is now responsible for about, I don't know, somewhere in the neighborhood of 400,000 or 500,000 of our web pages, because they're translated into about 100, well, more than 100 localized languages with the different currencies. And there I learned a lot about data privacy and compliance, as well as training and best practices for our software engineers. Since 2018, just over a year ago, I've been focused primarily on DevSecOps and security. And some of the other squads that I work closely with are pricing and orders and checkout. So as you can see, it's very important that we focus on security, because this is where we take your credit card information. This is how we process your order. This is how we keep track of what you're subscribed to. We also have the services that actually deploy the SaaS offerings you've purchased, and our product catalog and our support forum. And we are approaching $1 billion marketplace at this point. I am also an incident coordinator. So this is a role that we've adopted from PagerDuty and others, where we have somebody who's a good communicator in charge of coordinating the communications around our incidents. So I'm on call for that. So Robert Mueller is famous for saying, there are only 2 types of companies, those that have been hacked and those that will be. Snyk is an open source security platform vendor. They've been tracking the vulnerabilities in open source software for the last several years. And unfortunately, it's not getting better. So they've seen an 88% growth in application vulnerabilities just in the last 2 years. Last year, vulnerabilities for NPM went up by 47%. Maven Central vulnerabilities went up by 27%, and PHP Packagist by 56%. And they also tracked over 4 times more vulnerabilities found in Red Hat, Debian, and Ubuntu as compared to the year before. That's a challenge. Sonatype develops and sells static code analysis tools and Nexus, an open source governance platform. And they also surveyed more than 5,000 DevOps practitioners. And in their survey, they asked, how many of you believe that you had a breach within one of your web applications within the prior 12 months? And 24% of them said they had. So 1 in 4 chance this could happen to you this year. On our own websites, the part of IBM.com that we run, we detect and block hackers attempting to find vulnerabilities in our systems every single day. And the stakes are high. So GDPR, very famous, as well as several other privacy regulations that are coming into effect soon, hold companies liable for their security breaches. I don't know if you've read about the British Airways security breach, but they were fined, was it $230 million or something like that for a security breach. And ignorance is not a defense. You can't say, I didn't know that there was a problem in my systems, therefore you can't find me, right? I know from the inside that IBM mobilized for GDPR and these privacy regulations in a way that had not happened since like Y2K, probably. But it was exhausting. It was exhausting, and we have other things to work on as well, right? So we can't do this manually all the time. Now, the time between when a vulnerability was announced and the exploits appearing in the wild, 10 years ago, that was about 45 days. So a lot of our IT security standards are sort of built around this. Like, you have 30 days to fix a problem in production, right? But over the last decade, it's come down by 93%. So now it's about 3 days from the time when something's published to when it can be exploited by hackers. So that last stat was from Derek Weeks from Sonatype, and I love this quote: "We need to automate faster than evil." Now, in a typical security or a typical development and operations organization, you might have one person whose job role is primarily security for every 100 IT professionals. It's a very small ratio. And that tiny security team can't keep up with a fast-changing security landscape on their own. This is a race against time. And the only way that we're going to win it is by recruiting help from all of our development and operations teams. So if I think back a few years ago, what were we doing for security? We were doing a lot of things that are very important. Like, we were checking all the boxes, right? We had our annual cybersecurity training for the whole company, where we sort of teach people how to recognize possible phishing attacks and how to protect themselves from these things. We had our annual data privacy training, so we understood these laws and what we could and could not do with customer data. We made it very easy for people to report a possible security incident. For management, we have these quarterly self-assessments where the managers have to look at the security posture of their teams and rank themselves and see if there are any areas where they feel like they need to do more work. We had annual internal audits and, of course, some external audits, not as many as some places, but we have comprehensive IT security standards that everybody has to follow. We have our security and privacy controls, lots of checklists, forms they have to fill out. You know, what are you doing? Where are you processing the data before you go into production? We had automated web security testing suites. The most common one in our area is App Scanner, application security on cloud. We had known vulnerability scanners that people would run kind of when they felt like it. We had automated web security test suites, firewalls, obviously, as well as web application firewalls, and then monitoring and log analysis. And then we have, our corporate security office would put out these initiatives. Oh, we're going to install QRadar in all of our systems, right? And then roll that out to everybody. And then we had application and infrastructure inventories so that we knew exactly what we were running in production. So if we needed to patch something, we knew how to hit it. But those are just table stakes. That's just like ticking the boxes. It's not nearly enough to keep up with it. So how are we going to up our game? Well, the first thing is that we need our teams to be more self-sufficient with respect to security. They can't rely on the security experts to do this for them. And for them to be self-sufficient, we need to have more security subject matter experts. So we need to train more people in security than we did before. And we need more people who are willing to dig into the details of the findings for the security tools. So you can run all this static code analysis. You can run all these DAS scanners on your systems, and they'll come up with all these reports. But who's going to understand what those reports mean? Who's going to search through the lines of code to try to figure out if this vulnerability actually applies to your application or doesn't, right? Or is it a false flag? So we need people who have the expertise and the interest in doing that. And if we think back a few years to IT security practices a few years ago, they're too slow, way too labor intensive, they're tedious, they're boring, and we can't afford to dedicate all of our development resources to security. We have other things to do. We have to deliver value to the business. So how do we get out of this like catch-22 situation, right? So this is where DevSecOps comes in. So if I personally were to compare traditional IT security to DevSecOps, I'd say that traditional IT security looks like a lot of top-down mandates that come from the corporate security office and trickle down to the teams. With DevSecOps, it's more grassroots efforts. It's the actual application developers and people running the software in production who know it very well, who are bringing changes up. With traditional IT security, security is seen as a gate. It's a checkbox that you have to, get past before you can put things in production. With DevSecOps, we need to integrate security into the full software development lifecycle. So security needs to be part of your planning very early on. Security tools should be integrated into your integrated development environments. You need security in your unit tests, in your integration tests. You need to check for security in your deployment pipeline, and you need to be testing for security in production every day. Traditionally, IT security would have these manual rollouts where they'll say, okay, here's our new standard. All of you need to implement it. Go fill out a spreadsheet and tell us when you're done. With DevSecOps, it's much more about automated tools and building security into your CI/CD pipeline. Traditionally, we would focus on checklists and spreadsheets for security. But with DevSecOps, what we really want is highly engaged developers and operations who understand security and care about it. Traditionally, IT security had specialized experts who did security as a career. With DevSecOps, we still need those people. In fact, we need more of them, but we want to have frequent sharing of expertise across silos. Traditionally, a lot of visibility and control for security was at the corporate level. It was rolled up and reported at that level. But with DevSecOps, we want the individual application and service owners to have visibility and control over their apps and their security. Basically, it's DevOps. It's just DevOps. DevOps applied to security. So think about it. Grassroots efforts, full lifecycle, automation, highly engaged, frequent sharing of expertise, visibility and control. There you go. So that's why we come up with the term DevSecOps. All right, so how are we going to get highly engaged technical people? How do we get people to care? First thing is to teach them what to look for. So we want to teach our people how to think like a hacker. In fact, at IBM, we have an education series called Think Like a Hacker that's run by our security team, and it's been very popular. Second, we want to share what we're learning, and I'll get into a little more detail on how we do that later. We want to show them the actual threats to make it concrete and real. We want to give our application development teams full control, ownership, and responsibility for their applications. Reduce the toil, make this less boring and tedious. Make their lives easier, so when they integrate new security features in their applications, their work lives get better instead of worse. And we want to shift left and automate. So the earlier we can catch security problems, the easier they are to fix. So in this talk, we tried, probably 30 different things for our DevSecOps programs. I'm only going to go through the ones that were my personal favorites, the ones that actually worked. I'll tell you a little story how this happened. So about a year ago, I was looking for a new role in the organization. I felt the pain personally of trying to implement all of our security and compliance practices. So I went to our vice president and I said, I would like to focus on DevSecOps. I would like to find ways that we can automate more of this for our teams and make it more fun and interesting. Can I do that full time? And he approved it. So, I went out with a plan. I actually wrote an article about how to level up IT security expertise in your organization. It's like 20 things I was going to do. And then I went and I tried them. Most of them worked. Not all of them did. I will mention a couple that were not my favorite. They're not on the slides, but people like to hear what didn't work too, right? One thing that we do because we have to, and sometimes it catches things that are important, but I think there's room for improvement in the industry, is with static code analysis. So we run static code analysis. We get a report from one application of 3,000 security problems, and our developers' heads explode, right? I don't even know what to do with this. So I'm hopeful. We're seeing more work in like IAST testing and things like this, where you can see, automatically which security vulnerabilities actually apply to your software. I'm hoping that will get better. But right now, it's hard to get people to find and fix the important problems from a static code analysis tool. Another thing that has not gone as well as it could have is rolling out some tools. So some of the security tools require that you install an agent on every server, and some of them are very easy to deploy, and some of them are difficult to deploy. And the ones that require hand-holding with the developers are the ones that don't go very well. So if you can install it from a 5-step guide or a script that I can give you to run in the build, that'll work a lot better. All right, so let's get into more what did go very well. First one is education and expertise building. We have, inside IBM, if you're interested in figuring out how we did this, we contracted with an outside company to redesign our security and privacy for developers 101 class. So this is online training. I forget exactly how long it takes, just a couple of hours, that they required everybody who's technical to take. Like if you report into engineering, you're taking this class. And it goes through the most common vulnerabilities. So it explains what the OWASP top 25 are and what they mean to application developers. Things like how to validate your input to make sure that it's within the range of your expected inputs. How to escape your output to make sure that, for example, you're not letting somebody inject JavaScript into your HTML output, and how to handle personal and confidential data properly. It's been very helpful. So from here, we can just assume everybody has this basic foundation of knowledge. Another thing we do, we have a weekly operations meeting in my org. So there's 20 or 30 teams that meet once a week, and all of the HR managers are required to attend, and they have to send a technical representative from each squad to this weekly meeting. We go through all of our production outages. We talk a little bit about the postmortems. We talk about the upcoming outages. And in that, we have a 10-minute security corner. So here we have, about 40 or 50 of our technical leaders. We have their full attention for 10 minutes. We're going to talk about security. Some of the things that we talk about include recent news articles, exploits, things that they need to be aware of because they need to patch their own systems or they need to patch their applications. We talk about penetration test findings, especially if we found the same problem from the penetration test in more than one application. We talk about new security standards as they're rolling out. What are the new standards? What do they really mean? How long do you have to implement them? We talk about critical vulnerabilities, like if you need to make sure that if you're still running Internet Explorer, the 2% of people are doing that, you need to make sure you patch it right away. We talk about risk analysis. How do you do risk analysis, right? What does it mean to do a risk analysis? We talk about key and secret management. What are the best practices for key and secret management? What are the vaults and key stores that have been working well for us? Who can you go to if you get stuck? And we also talk about social engineering attacks and how to recognize them. Another thing that's kind of fun is our security guild. So this is open to anyone who wants to become more of a subject matter expert in security. So these are just security geeks, right? And we come in and we bounce ideas off of each other. So we might talk in more detail about something that was covered in last week's Security Corner, or something that we're thinking about covering in next week's Security Corner to kind of clean it up. We drive implementation of new initiatives across the teams, and we make sure we're having tech talks just to kind of keep it fresh, right? Documentation is really important. What we do is we're clarifying and documenting the best practices and tips and tool setup tricks and so on. So, for example, our IT security standards or our security tool setup instructions might be a little bit generic, right? They might follow the 80-20 rule, or they might not specify exactly how to implement this standard. And when we get it down to the level of our own platform, we want to be very prescriptive so people don't have to guess or reinvent the wheel. So say, okay, if you need to monitor your applications, you're going to use this to do it. So we make it very straightforward and simple. You get this library from here. This is the script that we run to deploy to Cloud Foundry and so on. And I found that sample code and step-by-step how-to guides are the most powerful. So whichever team implements it first, write down everything that you're doing and publish it. And usually, since there's a lot of similarity in our different environments, the next team can do it that much more quickly. We actually publish this in GitHub. So it is where the developers are used to finding their code and their documentation. And if anybody finds a problem, we just highly encourage them to go put a pull request up to update the documentation in GitHub. Slack channels are also very powerful tools for security. At the corporate level, like all of IBM, some examples of security-related channels that we have are the cybersecurity channel. We have a channel for each of our tools so that people who are using it can bounce ideas off of each other. We have a DevOps channel, Guild DevOps it is. We have an application security guild. We have postmortems channel, and we have one for front-end developers. And we see a lot of security content in all those. At the business unit level, which is one of several business units, we also have information security and data privacy channels, because they may be interpreted differently for different business units. For example, our consultants have different roles than our CIO, right? And then at the platform level, which is like roughly at the level I work with, maybe 20, 30 teams, we have a channel for all of our tech leads to collaborate. We have one for ops leads, and we have per squad channels. I should explain something though. In my own platform, it sounds like we have separate developer and operations teams, but that's not the way we work. Squads are DevOps squads, and the developers are the ones who are running the applications in production. In fact, my team is called Test and Operations, but that doesn't mean that we're doing test and operations for everybody. What it means is that we're piloting new ways to test things and new ways to operate things, and then we're teaching the other teams how to do it themselves. Speaking of pilots, how do we roll out security tools? It's a collaboration between our corporate information security office and my own test and operations team. So the CISO, what they will do is they will evaluate and then purchase the most delightful tools, the ones that they love. Then they'll train a few internal subject matter experts on each tool, so people who work for our company. And they'll also set up, in most cases, weekly office hours with the tool vendor experts. So they'll have somebody from the vendor call in once a week, and anybody can join and get their questions answered. On my own team, we pilot it in our infrastructure. We figure out what our tips and tricks are. We document them. And then we pair up one by one, pair programming with new adopters, anywhere they need help. Sometimes we make a little spreadsheet and call it a tracker, like how many teams have adopted this. And if we find somebody's lagging, we'll call them up. Hey, how's it going with that new tool? Can I help you? And then we also have tool-specific Slack channels, like I mentioned before, where you can drop in and get quick support if you're stuck. So that's how we roll out the security tools and get them integrated into our applications. Another thing that was fun, it wasn't my idea, but I thought it was a great one, was the toolbox at IBM and DevSecOps Summit. What we did at each site where we had a few thousand developers, we invited our vendors in to have an internal conference. And they were willing to do this, actually, because you think about this, how many vendors are happy to be here for like 500 people, right? We could get, if we could get 500 people to come in, great. So our vendors came in, they set up their booths in the hallway, just like at a conference. They ran their conference talks in our conference rooms, just like at a conference. And we invited all of our developers to go and learn about the tools. And it was free for them. And this was a great win-win situation because for our developers, they know that these are tools that have already gone through the entire procurement process. We've already paid for them. There's something you can use for free. Great. And for the vendors, here are a bunch of developers who are ready to adopt your tool, who just need that little push, right? And if they get that push, then you have a lot more buy-in and adoption of your product, and we're likely to continue renewing our contract from year to year. So we were able to do that at several of our sites and got really high net promoter scores. So think about that. You might be able to do that if you have a larger development site. So changing gears a little bit, let's talk about visibility and observability. Which one of these has more impact? There's a possible injection vulnerability in your app. Like here's the 3,000 things that your static code analysis tool just announced, right? Or here are actual logs from this morning of hackers trying to inject something into your database. Or it's theoretically possible for someone to point a denial of service attack at your app. Or here's an attempted denial of service attack right now. You can search your logs for alert, script, and etc. And you can bring those right up and you can see that. If you have a web application, it's probably happening today. You can show them the web application firewall in action. So I'm personally a fan of Signal Sciences because you plug it into your app and then the application developers see the actual attacks as they happen. Bug bounty program. So IBM works with HackerOne and we have a bug bounty program and people can report vulnerabilities to us. And when our application developers get those reports, they are certainly highly motivated to fix them. Also, ownership and responsibility. Our application developers are the ones who are on call. So they have that full ownership and responsibility. We also have a DevOps dashboard where we just display things like agile metrics and operational metrics like availability. We also have security metrics. One of my favorite is deployment frequency. So if you're deploying less than once a week and our goal is to make sure that systems are patched within a few days, you're not deploying often enough. And if you have an application that's been sitting in production for 6 to 8 months with open source packages in it, it's stale. It needs to be updated. We also automate security checks so you have less to worry about later. We're doing known vulnerability scans in our dev and test pipelines and every day. And I want to make sure that you guys, I'll have this on my last slide or I can give it to you later. We have a free open source script that will patch Node and Angular apps for you. So this automates about 10 steps that our developers were having to go through every time they wanted to patch a script. And we just run this in a daily build. So every day it's putting up a pull request. Here are the patches you need for your system. And it actually runs your test suite. And you can just accept the pull request and deploy it to production. Dynamic web application security testing also works well for us. Like AppScan or application security on cloud. And we report the results to the team Slack channels to make them highly visible. Automatically locking down our production systems. So all of our systems should be under infrastructure as code. If you want to make a change, you cannot log into the system. You have to change it in the code. And to further that goal, sunsetting old infrastructure. So we're almost entirely moved into the cloud now with automatically deployed systems because the old bare metal infrastructure is what's most likely to be manually managed and most likely that will have security problems or trouble keeping up with the patches. Thinking about what's next, going forward, we're helping more teams adopt these tools, finding what's most tedious next and automating it. We have a DevSecOps Explorer badge coming out soon. hopefully by the end of this year, where anybody in the company can spend a few hours learning about DevSecOps in more detail, and more Kubernetes security automation coming up. So what can you do? You can help your own teams with this. You can find the tedious work, what's bothering you, and automate it. You can get excited about security yourself and share what you're learning as broadly as possible. And that's it. Thank you very much.